Now, thousands of people infected by contaminated blood transfusions they received on the NHS in the 70s and 80s are facing significant cuts in the help they receive from the government. One of them is Andrew Evans from Birmingham, who was infected with blood containing HIV and hepatitis C at the age of 5. The issue is going to be debated in Parliament today. Andrew is going to be there, I think, as part of a protest. Andrew, good morning to you.
Good morning, Adrian.
Because you got HIV and hepatitis C then from contaminated blood products.
Yes, I did. I was 5 years old at the time.
And why did you need this blood transfusion or these series of blood transfusions?
Okay, well, most of the infections happen through a condition called haemophilia. And haemophilia is a condition that means that the blood doesn't clot properly. And so you have to have replacement clotting factor, they call it, which is derived from blood donors. So you take the plasma, you do a process called fractionation, you put it all into a big pot, lots of donors together, you stir it all up and you serve it out into these little freeze-dried vials, and that's how you administer it to haemophiliacs to stop their bleeding.
And that presumably then was the condition that you had as a 5-year-old, yeah? That's
right, yeah. Haemophilia is a genetic condition, it's hereditary. And so, it's something that I was born with and, that I expected to live with for the rest of my life, yeah.
And presumably at the time then, there were transfusions made with HIV and hepatitis C that, were just not known or not recognised as a risk at the time?
Well, we've since gathered a lot of evidence to prove the fact that these infections were known. They were warned about by senior doctors in the United States, where most of the blood came from, that we should discontinue using these products because they are infected. The problem, as I say, with the factor VIII issue is that you take blood from thousands of donors, and in this case they were taking blood from prisoners on Skid Row, drug users, people who were being paid to donate their blood in the United States, and who were most certainly high-risk donors. And then they were putting them all into a big pot. So if even one of those blood donations was infected with something, the entire pot of thousands would have been infected. And so that's why there's such a huge amount of problem within the haemophilia community, because almost 100% of haemophiliacs at the time were exposed to hepatitis C, and you were 6 or 7 more times more likely to be infected with HIV as well.
So whatever the rights and wrongs of how the transfusions came about, you in any event were an innocent victim. Like many others, you had haemophilia, you needed these transfusions, yeah, and contracted HIV and hepatitis C. What kind of impact has that had on your life?
I developed full-blown AIDS at age 14. I was very ill. At the time, there was no combination therapy about. So they put me on to whatever was available at the time, which happened to be AZT, which was a killer drug in itself. I developed full-blown AIDS. I was in hospital for around about 6 years before the medications became available. I was at death's door for most of that time. I missed my formative years because of it. And, it's obviously ripped my family apart. My sister had to bring herself up. My parents obviously went through absolute hell with looking after me and visiting me in hospital and expecting the worst all the time. And of course, it's because I've missed a lot of education. It's meant that my life has been off track ever since. I haven't been able to follow a normal career path. It's been very difficult.
And the amount of help that individuals receive from the government has tended to be around, I know it can be variable, but something around £7,000 a year, yeah, to compensate for, but also to help you, meet various health needs that you might have relating, yeah, to those conditions which you contracted innocently. Yeah. And now the proposal is what? That they would be abolished or significantly reduced?
Well, at the moment, since 2011, they brought in a regular payment for people with HIV and with later stage hepatitis of £15,000 a year, which they're hoping to, with these new proposals, to cap it at 15,000, not index linked, to CPI so that it would never raise. So over time it would be a real terms loss. Whereas in Scotland, they're looking to double those payments at least, and they're going to pay people £27,000 a year for a single infection and £37,000 for both infections. So we're looking at significant differences in the recognition and the respect shown to victims, and the way that they're going to deal with it as well.
Yeah, and obviously you would argue that these risk factors were known to government at the time. I think ministers at Westminster say they won't accept liability because HIV was only formally identified in 1983. Yeah. Technology to heat treatment, which would have reduced the risk, I think was only available from the mid-1980s, and hepatitis C was not identified until later.
That's right. HIV was formally identified in 1983, as you say, but before that it was known as the HTLV3 virus. It was sweeping through America at the time. It was killing the gay community, as we know, and drug users. Hepatitis C was known to be around, but they didn't have a test for it before the 90s. They called it hepatitis non-A, non-B before that. And they also called it haemophilic hepatitis as well, because it was known that people with haemophilia were getting ill with some sort of liver disease, although they couldn't figure out what it was. So, all of these things were around in one form or another since as early as the late 1960s, in fact. And during the 70s, repeated warnings were sent to the UK government and to the NHS that these products should be discontinued in favour of safer products which were available at the time, cryoprecipitate, for example. But we've taken so many legal avenues to try to sort this, and the government won't accept liability despite that huge amount of evidence. Every legal avenue has been blocked, be it by Crown immunity, statute of limitations, something else. So I think we've come to accept that we can't do this legally and get the government to accept liability. It's just a losing battle for us.
Well, listen, Andrew, we'll see what happens today following the House of Commons debate and your protest there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's BBC WM. It's 7:16.